There is so much police misconduct, and I saw it firsthand as a public defender. I saw, not only did I see perjury in the courtroom and falsifying documents, but also false arrests and physical abuse. You should see my camera roll is filled with photographs of my clients that I took at arraignments who had gashes on their faces or bloody bruised, and I said, "How did this happen?" And they said, "The police." And these were all the types of police misconduct that I would see. And yet the district attorney's office just routinely would hide the records from us, would not show any of the, even despite litigation, despite requirements, they would just withhold this. Police who've lied on the stand, police who have known instances of misconduct where the city has had to pay out, thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars based on this misconduct. And they would just deliberately hide that evidence from us. And that erodes public trust, that hurts communities. And, the Manhattan DA has really been complicit in this continuing misconduct perpetrated by the NYPD and used his power to shield the police instead of holding them accountable. And so it's so important, and my understanding of this comes from my firsthand experience as a public defender. And so when I'm Manhattan District Attorney, police misconduct will not be tolerated. And I will have a dedicated unit designed for prosecuting police officers. And, that's really how we'll keep our communities safer and restore trust and integrity in the Manhattan DA's office.
What's your view on police unions and how do they fit into this national discourse that we're having?
So police unions are incredibly powerful. And I think it's one of the reasons why you're finally hearing about all of them, because we've seen this kind of police misconduct that has existed for a really long time, forever, in fact, across the country. But the police unions have a ton of power, a ton of money, and they've shown overwhelming hostility to even the mildest reforms or accountability measures. And so it is going to be extremely tough to go up against a police union. And that's, I think, why so many district attorneys really shy away from these, speaking out against the police, because they know how powerful these police unions are. But I think as someone who's always been outspoken against the police, like this is no change for me. And I've sworn off all police money. I will not take a single penny from law enforcement or their unions. And so that's how I'll continue to operate. And I think that this is, holding them accountable and prioritizing reform is something that really matters to me, and will be my top priority as district attorney.
When we have these national flare-ups where there's a really awful event that happens and there becomes national discussion, uproar about it, it seems like there's a discussion with the mayor and it seems like there's reform that's proposed, and then when the cameras go away, the police union comes out and says, actually, there's no way we're going to do this.
Well, I do think that those conversations have been attempted. I don't think that everyone's just calling for reform without speaking to the police, but they just have shown truly overwhelming hostility to even the mildest of reforms or accountability measures. And so I think that there's maybe less of a difference in some of these things than they would even realize, but they're so resistant to even listening. Because, for example, if we stop asking them to prosecute and arrest people for low-level drug offenses, or stop arresting people for being mentally ill or poor, stop asking them to be social workers, maybe they would actually be better off, but they are just, really hostile to even having those conversations.
So last week it was reported that an NYPD officer was charged as working on behalf of the Chinese government to help find Tibetan dissidents and track them. It's also been reported that there's a gang within the LAPD called the Banditos, and there's been, over a decade's worth of warnings about white supremacist infiltration of police. How does that, when I hear those stories, like, how does that change the story for you, or does it change the story for you? And how does it, when I hear it, it just feels like it adds such a layer of complexity and chaos to an already very contentious discussion. Just wondering what your take is.
So some of those cases, that are brought are brought federally, but I do think that, I've been asked whether I believe there are white supremacists within the NYPD, and I say absolutely. I mean, their leader came out and endorsed Donald Trump, who won't condemn white supremacy, who in fact tells the Proud Boys to stand by and stand up, or whatever the phrase is, and has really incited violence across the country. So I think that that's, quite clear. And I think that that's very challenging. And I think, at least speaking to it from the part of, the future elected district attorney of Manhattan, I think there's a moral obligation to engage in cases of police misconduct that rise to the level of a crime, or even cases where it doesn't, but there is misconduct, and there needs to be accountability. And so, the community has the right to know who they're interacting with. The taxpayers of New York have the right to know about the misconduct of the officers whose salary and civil rights lawsuit settlements and judgments they fund. So, the city of New York has paid out nearly $250 million in NYPD related lawsuits in like the last fiscal year. So, such a minuscule number of those cases were even actually prosecuted. And so even when it falls below the level of a crime, I think that the Manhattan District Attorney's Office has an obligation to get involved, to there's action that is warranted. And I will make sure that those lists are public, that there's transparency. I'll support the Civilian Complaint Review Board in bringing actions against the NYPD, and share that information in my office and with the defense attorneys who go up against it.